Motion hearing continues, July 5th, 2006. Sheriff Gerald A. Pagel, called as a witness herein, having been first duly sworn, was examined and testified as follows. The clerk, please be seated. Please state your name. Spell your last name for the record. The witness, Gerald A. Pagel, Pagel. Direct examination by Attorney Kratz. Question. Mr. Pagel, how are you employed? Answer. I am the sheriff for Calumet County. Question. And as we've heard in this last series of examinations, your department, and you personally, were requested to assume investigative responsibility in the disappearance of Teresa Halbach and the subsequent investigation into how that occurred. Is that correct? That is correct. Sheriff Pagel, do you recall on Saturday, November 5, 2005, being at the Avery salvage yard and accepting responsibility for this investigation? Yes, I do. After that period of time, is it a correct statement, as we've heard from Sheriff Peterson, that your department, in concert with the Division of Criminal Investigation, made all investigative decisions? That is, you directed the investigation. Is that correct? Attorney Strang. Now that we're beyond preliminary questions, I'm going to object to leading. At least I assume Sheriff Pagel is not hostile to Mr. Kratz. The court. The objection is sustained. Question by Attorney Kratz. Who then, Sheriff Pagel, was involved in directing this investigation? It was members of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department in conjunction with the Department of Criminal Investigation as far as a joint investigation teamwork. Mr. Strang's motion as to pretrial publicity and related motions deal with pretrial publicity. Let me first ask you whether you have any experience or training in media relations, specifically as it relates to high-profile cases. Yes, I do. I've gone to 2 separate training sessions in media relations with law enforcement. Are you an elected official? Yes, I am. And similar to Sheriff Peterson, do you consider yourself the head of your law enforcement agency? Yes, I do. Sheriff Pagel, prior to the discovery of Teresa Halbach's vehicle on November 5th, was your agency involved in what's been referred to as a missing persons investigation? Yes, we were. Could you describe just briefly the scope of that investigation for us? On, I believe it was November 3rd, our department received a call of a missing person, that being Teresa Halbach. Our agency became immediately involved in speaking with the relatives and friends of Teresa, and ultimately, that Thursday evening, I received a call at home from investigator Mark Wiegert informing me of the fact that Teresa Halbach was missing and that last contact with her had been on October 31st. Have you been engaged in missing person investigations before? Yes, I have. As part of those investigations, Sheriff, and I will ask you directly, as part of this investigation as well, did you invite participation of the media or the general public in assisting and locating Ms. Halbach? Yes, I did. How was that done? That was done Thursday evening, shortly after I received the call from Investigator Wiegert. I responded to the Sheriff's Department, and it's been my theory, and also information that has been provided to me through investigative matters, that the quicker you get information to the media, the better. We need public's assistance in trying to locate missing individuals, and this was my thought that evening, was to get the information about Teresa, about her disappearance, to the media, so that we could have the public's assistance in attempting to locate her. After Ms. Halbach's vehicle was found on the 5th of November, were there discussions as to what, if anything, would be disseminated or told to the general public? Yes, it was felt that we needed to control the information that was disseminated to the general public. It was done for investigative purposes and also to control the information that the media received, that we needed to have disseminated to them. We still had a missing person, and we needed, again, the public's assistance in trying to locate Teresa. We found her vehicle, that was true, but we still had not found Teresa, so we still felt that we needed the public's assistance in locating her. Was it decided, Sheriff Pagel, who would be involved in disseminating information about both about the investigation and the request for assistance from the public? Yes, a decision was made that we were going to, again, control who the media went to as far as gathering or obtaining information. And it was felt that myself and yourself would be the individuals who would disseminate the information. Again, we could control the information that the media would obtain, and also that it would not impair the investigation. Often in these type of cases, the media wishes to contact investigators, contact individuals who are involved in the investigation. And we felt it would be better if we just had two individuals who would contact and who would be the individuals that they would go to in attempting to obtain information. While this case remained a missing persons investigation, was it decided how many times per day the media would receive information? Yes, we felt that we would provide information daily to the media to keep them informed, and also to, again, provide information to the general public as to the outcome, the scope, where the investigation was going. Sheriff Pagel, on those early occasions, that is the press conference on the 5th and perhaps the 6th of November, could you characterize the interest from the public, that is, from both the media and general public, be able to gauge how interested they were in this investigation? We were able to determine that there was a huge interest in this investigation. And we knew then, and we knew beginning, going into this investigation, that there would be a huge or a large interest in the media for this investigation and by the public as to this investigation. Were there any discussions held as to limiting what was said and the reasons to not provide information of a specific nature? Yes, we had daily meetings to discuss what information was going to be provided to the media. Again, this was done for several reasons. One was for investigative purposes, to ensure that information was not disseminated that we did not wish to have disseminated. We also wanted to do what is being alleged here, in that not having prejudicial information, inflammatory information, provided to the public. And we also had a sensitivity issue. We felt that we owed it to the Halbach family, to the relatives, that information provided to the media, to the public, would be sensitive in nature and that we kept them informed. They were involved in the loop. In fact, before any information was provided to the media, the Halbachs were contacted and they were informed of what information was going to be provided that evening or that day. Was there more information that the Sheriff's Department had in its possession that was held back or not provided to the media during this investigation? Most definitely. Sheriff Pagel, at any point, at least prior to the 9th of November, was a specific suspect identified? No, there was not. In fact, it was a wide open investigation. On the 9th of November, Stephen Avery was arrested on a charge of felon in possession of a firearm. Do you remember holding a press conference announcing that fact on the 9th? Yes, I do. Do you recall any discussions on the 9th regarding limiting your comments to the facts that were contained within that public document? That is the criminal complaint? Yes, that information was going to be public knowledge in the criminal complaint, and it pertained to the felon in possession. We still had a missing person investigation. Sheriff Pagel, later in that week, between the 9th and 11th of November, do you recall receiving specific questions and even at the press conferences, obtaining inquiries regarding allegations made by Mr. Avery and his family regarding being set up or framed? Yes, I do. In fact, I would be receiving phone calls from the media who indicated that they had received information from either Mr. Avery or members of his family, and they were making inquiries about this information that they were receiving. And again, I would not elaborate on those types of things at that particular time being via phone contacts. Any members of the media would be informed that any information that was going to be released would be released at a news conference to be determined or announced later. All right, that brings me then to questions regarding the press conference held on the 11th of November, Friday the 11th. Do you recall that press conference? Yes, I do. Do you recall specific information being released as it related to public questions or direct questions from the Averys as to being set up or framed? Yes, again, we felt that we owed it to the public to ensure them that there was no information, no evidence gathered through the investigation tending to indicate that there was any type of conspiracy theory in effect here. Now, this may be a little awkward since I'm not a witness in this case, but I'm going to ask you about conversations that you and I had. Do you recall specific conversations with me regarding limiting or being very careful about what was disseminated to ensure a fair trial for Mr. Avery? Yes, I do. Again, we would have conferences daily to discuss what was going to be disseminated. You also indicated that it's your policy, once charges are filed, that the information disseminated to the media would cease, and that it would be the joint thought here that anything after that point would not be disseminated. There would be no more conferences. You're aware that at some point, in fact, on the 5th of November, Judge Fox from Manitowoc County appointed me as special prosecutor in this case. Is that correct? That's correct. Have you worked on other criminal cases with me as the Calumet County Sheriff? Yes, I have. Are you familiar with my general policy of not commenting on pending criminal matters other than in the courtroom? Yes, that's your policy. Sheriff Pagel, while present with me at not only press conferences, but other times that we may have been approached, do you recall me and other members of my office reiterating or explaining that policy, that no comment policy, if you will, to members of the media? Yes, you did. Have you individually, Sheriff Pagel, received offers from local or regional or even national news sources to comment on this case? Yes, I have received numerous requests from the news media, not only in Green Bay, but in Milwaukee. And I have also received numerous calls from national news outlets requesting interviews, requesting comments. And everything nationally has been refused. I indicated in the beginning that I would not go on any national news shows to discuss this matter. Several months after Mr. Avery's criminal complaint was filed, I think it was the 14th of November when it was filed, but in early March 1st and 2nd, did you become aware of a second suspect having been arrested regarding the homicide and related charges with Ms. Halbach? Yes, I did. And who was that person? Brendan Dassey. On March 1st, do you recall holding a joint news conference informing the public? Attorney Strang, leading Attorney Kratz. I'm sorry, what was that? Attorney Strang, leading Attorney Kratz. Oh, question by Attorney Kratz. I could ask, what day did you hold the news conference that you informed the public of Mr. Dassey's involvement? I believe it was March 1st. All right, then. Do you recall a criminal complaint being drafted and filed against Mr. Dassey? Yes, I do. Then do you recall another, in fact, the last press conference jointly held in this case? Yes, I do. Do you remember when that was? That would have been the following day. I believe it was March 2nd. Sheriff Pagel, prior to that news conference, were you aware of the details? That is, were you aware of the information that would be included in that public comment, in that criminal complaint against Mr. Dassey? Yes, I was. Do you recall having conversations with me about what information should be released and how to release that information? Yes, you had indicated that the information that was going to be released was information that was in the document, and a decision had to be made how it was going to be released or what was going to be released. And it was felt that we would, again, try to control the information that was going to be released, rather than having the news media take the report and then go wherever they were going to go with it. It was a decision that was difficult to do, but was ultimately decided that we needed to provide the information to the public and, again, control what information was disseminated. Without limiting the information in that news conference, what did you believe would happen if that document was simply released to the public? Personally, I felt it was going to be helter-skelter, that the news media was going to take it and go in all directions with it. And again, we would probably lose control over what was gathered by the news media if we just gave them the articles and gave them the criminal complaint, and let them go from there. And again, we felt that we needed to control the information. You had mentioned sensitivity to the Habak family, to the victims, especially regarding that disturbing information. Were meetings held before the 2nd of March to disclose to the family what would be included in that document? Yes, we had met the night before with them and provided them with the information that the investigators had gathered, and that provided them with the information that was going to be in the criminal complaint. At any time, Sheriff Pagel, were there attempts, and I can only ask you individually, but were there attempts by you to influence any potential jurors or to in any way prejudice Mr. Avery through this criminal process? None. In fact, this is again why we tried to control the information that was released, so that we could control any prejudicial information, any inflammatory information, so as to prevent as much as possible any pretrial prejudicial publicity. And again, that's consistent with other cases that you and I have worked on. Is that correct? That is correct, Attorney Kratz. That's all the questions I have of Sheriff Pagel. Thank you, Judge. The court. Mr. Strang, cross-examination by Attorney Strang. Is it typical if a missing person complaint that you, as the sheriff, would be notified at home after hours on the day that someone is reported missing? It's not typical, nor is it non-typical. The investigators, the staff, do keep me informed of their investigations and do keep me informed if they want something done. And in this particular case, they wanted the information disseminated to the media, and they felt it would be best if I came in and did that for them. All right, and you say the investigators. How many investigators or detectives are employed in the Calumet County Sheriff's Department? We have 4 investigators. Does that include the lead investigator or chief investigator? They are all investigators. There's no lead investigator. Whoever gets the case initially is basically the lead investigator pertaining to that particular investigation. And to whom do the 4 investigators report directly? They report to either the lieutenant or myself. And I will keep this short and I hope simple for you, but to the extent that you know, does the Calumet County Sheriff's Department have fewer sworn personnel than the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department? Yes. Do you know roughly the numbers? No, I don't. At least your own department? I don't know what the difference would be. How about your department? How many sworn officers of any rank? Okay, we have 24 sworn officers, I believe, 27 non-sworn. Non-sworn being support people, secretarial, clerical, bookkeeping, business management. dispatch, and correctional officers. Very good. Were you acquainted with the Halbach family personally before November 3rd, 2005? I know members of the Halbach family. Yes, I do. Personally? Yes. Had you known Teresa Halbach personally? No, I did not. But you knew some members of her family? Yes. Was that in part why Detective Wiegert said he was calling you that evening? No, it was not. He had no knowledge that I would have known the Halbachs. But what he did say was, hey, we need to get the public's help, or words to that effect? Yes. He felt that it was important that the information be disseminated to the media so that they could disseminate it to the public for their assistance. The media being a tool to reach the public? That is correct. All right, you agreed? Yes, I did. As early as the evening of November 3? Yes. That evening is the point at which, and I think your words were, you knew going into the investigation that there would be a huge amount or a huge interest on the part of the public and the media? Yes, well, I guess not that particular evening. We didn't know the enormity. November 5th is when we realized that we were probably going to have a large media interest. You testified on direct in response to Mr. Kratz's question. You knew going into the investigation. And so my question is, is it November 5 or sometime prior to or after that you knew going into the investigation it would be a huge media and public interest? What I was referring to was November 5th, the day that her vehicle was found on the Avery property. What was it that was so hugely interesting about her car being found? The fact that Stephen Avery had garnered a large amount of media interest concerning his release from prison for charges that he had been alleged to have committed, and the vehicle being found on Avery property. You didn't have to be a rocket scientist to know that the media was, again, going to be interested in this. Stephen Avery was a man you knew from the media before November 5? That is correct. You were familiar, at least, with the general outlines of his wrongful conviction and eventual exoneration? Yes. Release from prison? Yes. Were you aware that he had filed a big lawsuit against Manitowoc County over that series of events? Prior to what? November 5. No, I was not aware of any lawsuit prior to that. But you were aware of Avery and you thought, gee, this will attract the media. Yes. All right. Now, that's 2 days after Miss Halbach is reported missing. And I guess it's as early as that evening, November 3, in which you realized, look, we need some public assistance here. And the way to accomplish that is by using the media? Yes, we felt that the information should be disseminated concerning Teresa Halbach and her disappearance, and the fact that we were looking for her vehicle and her. Giving the information directly to the media was not the only strategy you employed to get the word out to the public. I guess I don't. For example, you had a telephone number that you encouraged members of the public to call and encouraged investigators to share with the public. Our local sheriff's department number, yes, or tip number. Right, sort of a dedicated line, not for this case, but for tips or for information from the public. That is correct. You got that out to the public? Yes. You had members of your department going to friends and family members of Teresa Halbach in the early days of this search? Yes, most definitely. In part to ask them when they had last seen her or what information they might have, but also in part to encourage them to talk to others? Yes, I try to garner any information we could from them. Again, when was the last time you had seen her? And garner any information we could about Teresa. Sure, and to get the network going, so to speak, might ask a friend, who else do you know she may have talked to or called or been emailing, or appointments she may have had, things like that. Yeah, would be a typical missing person investigation. You also took some other steps that would be publicly visible but controlled. I mean, for example, did you rent an airplane or make arrangements for an airplane at some point? Yes, that was done on November 4th. Went to an aviation service and took a plane up in the air? Yes. And that involved circling a good deal, I assume, over parts of Manitowoc County? Manitowoc, Brown, Calumet. I don't think we got down into Sheboygan, but basically a 3-county area. Sure, and at fairly low altitude? Yes. That, at least would attract some public attention and raise the profile that people should be on the lookout for a missing and possibly endangered person. The fact that we used an airplane? Yeah. No, that was basically a search to try and locate her vehicle. We knew that her vehicle was missing, and we were trying to locate her vehicle, or anything which could be of assistance in the missing person investigation. Okay, so is that why you only used the plane on Friday, November 4th? Yes. Once you found the car, the Toyota, there was no need for further flyovers or that kind of visible activity? There were other flyovers done after, yes. There were the use of other planes and helicopters throughout the search for Teresa. The search continued until, it continued beyond this, but on November 8th, some bone fragments were found. Does that sound right? That could be the date, yes. All right, which would have been a Tuesday? That would be about right, yes. Were you personally out at the Avery Auto Salvage property on the days following this phone call at home on November 3? Yes, I was. Each day? Yes, I was there every day. Starting Friday, November 4? No, the 5th. So, November 5th? Yes. Saturday, November 5. And then how many days in a row did you remain personally out at the Avery Auto Salvage property? I would go out there during the daylight hours and generally would leave anywhere between 7, 8, 9 at night. How long did that continue, Sheriff Pagel? I was there the entire week that we were out there. And until the road was reopened and the searching was done? That's correct. All right. Now, during that time that you were out there, during these long daylight hours, essentially, did you personally direct the activities of Lieutenant Link? Did I personally? How did you phrase it? Direct the activities of Lieutenant Link of the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. Not personally, no. It could have been done either through the command post. Again, they were a support group. So we would utilize our investigators, our officers, our personnel, along with agents from the Department of Criminal Investigation, and individuals would then be assigned to those particular individuals who would be the lead people doing particular programs or parts of the investigation out there. Activities. All right. So you set up a command post? Yes. You set that up in conjunction with the DCI? Yes. There were other law enforcement agencies also at the command post? Yes, there were other agencies involved in the investigation who were there for support and assistance. In the command post? Not necessarily inside the command post. We tried to limit individuals who would be in the command post. We had a number of individuals who were out there on any particular day, and we couldn't have all those individuals in the command post, but we would have the individuals who were going to be responsible for doing a particular activity given their assignments. Okay, physically, what was the command post? Physically, what was it? Yeah, it's our command post trailer that we have at the Sheriff's Department. Like a Winnebago type? It's a good size. Okay, but not everybody can crowd into those things. Right. Okay, so people, law enforcement officers, would come in as necessary to participate in discussions? Yes. Whoever we needed to discuss matters with would be invited into the command post, and we would then discuss our information with them. Then you ran the investigation in conjunction with DCI, you said? Yes. And then jointly with a number of other agencies? Yes. The FBI was involved? Yes, the FBI. They were in the command post from time to time? They were only out there for a short period of time. They arrived and indicated that if we needed their assistance for anything, we should feel free to contact them. I think they might have been there personally only a couple hours. Okay, but they said, call if you need help? Yes. The Wisconsin State Patrol was out there for a longer period of time? They were there several days, yes. They had command officers in and out of the command post? Yes, they would have had individuals in and out. The Two Rivers Police Department? Yes. They had senior staff in and out of the command post? I don't know if they would have had individuals in and out specifically, or if they were just part of the support group. All right, but what you tried to do was run this as a collaborative or a joint effort? Yes. You consulted with Manitowoc County Sheriff's personnel? Yes. They were in and out of the command post? Yes. At least the ranking members were? Yes. So you weren't necessarily personally directing things, but you were part of a group that was making conjunctive or joint or collaborative investigative decisions so that all the tasks got done? Attempting to, yes. Right. Were you aware on November 5, let's say, that Lieutenant Link and Sergeant Colburn of the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department recently had given depositions in the Stephen Avery civil lawsuit? No, I was not aware of that. When did you first learn that? Today in court. Mr. Avery then was arrested on November 9. If I understand your testimony correctly? I believe that would be correct, yes. Charged initially with being a felon in possession of a firearm? That's correct. Now, you've had time in the criminal justice system to know that typically, at least when somebody is charged in a circuit court of the state of Wisconsin, there's a criminal complaint filed? Yes. With the court? Yes. Will eventually be filed. With the court, correct? Yes. And typically, as far as I know, always, that's a publicly available document? Yes. That is, anyone from the public, including a reporter, could go to the clerk of court's office and say, may I see the criminal complaint against Joe Blow or Stephen Avery or anyone else? That is correct. Make a copy of it? Yes. And leave with it? Yes. All right, so in terms of making information available to the public, one way to do that is to file at least an unsealed public document in court. It would be a public document, yes. That was done here with the felon in possession of a firearm complaint as to Mr. Avery, correct? I believe so, yes. It was done with the criminal charge against Brendan Dassey on or about March 2, 2006. That's correct. You know, of your personal knowledge, that Mr. Dassey, although 16 years old, was charged as an adult from the outset? Yes. So you knew that that was a public proceeding from the outset, not a juvenile and closed proceeding? Yes. You knew that the criminal complaint against Brendan Dassey, therefore, was a public document? That is correct. You and Mr. Kratz began to talk about public dissemination of information in the investigation when? The dissemination of information to the media and to the public? Yeah. That was done on the first day, that Saturday, that we were at the Avery property. Mr. Kratz was out there as well? Yes. You learned on November 5, or shortly after, that a number of people lived on what we're calling the Avery property, correct? That's correct. Family members, including extended family members, correct? Yes. Husbands, wives, boyfriends, girlfriends, a whole collection of people? That is correct. This is a relatively large parcel of 40 acres, plus. Yes. Stephen Avery being one of the people who lives somewhere on what you are calling the Avery property? That is correct. On November 5, when you and Mr. Kratz were on the Avery property, you began to discuss, I guess, gee, how are we going to disseminate information to the media? And what information was going to be disseminated? And what, were you and Mr. Kratz the only two decision makers on those discussions? No. The investigative staff, agents from DCI, investigators from my office would meet and discuss and come up with what investigative material, what information was going to be and should be and needed to be released to the media and to the public. So again, I guess a little bit, as you were describing the investigation itself, your personal style or your approach to dissemination of information to the media was more collegial or collaborative and inclusive. That would be correct. And that's just a matter of personal style for you? No, it's done for a number of reasons. One, to ensure that information that investigators have, information that they do not wish to be divulged, is not divulged. And again, it's better to do it jointly, together, so that you don't say or disseminate information that should not be, and disseminate information that should be. Again, we had a missing person. We were still looking for Teresa Halbach. And throughout this case, we were looking for Teresa Halbach. And we felt that it was important that the media, the public, be provided with this information. In a criminal investigation, well, first of all, a criminal investigation would be different in your world, in the jargon of law enforcement, than a missing persons investigation, correct? Yes, there would be a different aspects. You separate those two things or distinguish between them? You can, occasionally, but sometimes they run hand in hand. If you still do not have if you still have not located the missing person, you still have an individual you're trying to locate, so they can run jointly. Of course, but at the outset, in law enforcement, at least in Calumet County, you distinguish between those two, a missing persons investigation and the criminal investigation? Yes. Many missing person investigations turn out to be a teenager who was upset with mom and ran away for a few hours. That can be true, yes. And I think even here, I don't remember which news conference, but I think at some point you or Mr. Kratz made a comment that we now have a criminal investigation, not just a missing persons investigation. This isn't verbatim. I don't remember the exact words. Yeah, but worse to the effect that the investigation was tending to lead toward a criminal investigative nature. Right, and that would have been, regardless of when or who said it, you began to think of this as a criminal investigation, or at least leading that way. When? Probably after information was obtained from the crime lab, which was providing us with details as to information being found in Teresa's vehicle. So the vehicle was found November 5? Yes. What looks like blood is found that same day, November 5? Yes, I believe so. Some swabs for collection of the blood is undertaken? Yes, the entire vehicle is removed from the Avery property and taken to Madison, to the crime lab. What day was it removed? It was removed Saturday evening, late Saturday evening. Taken directly to the crime lab? Yes. And further collection of evidence is done then from the vehicle? Yeah, the vehicle is then analyzed for evidence. When then did you get your first information back from the crime lab that caused you to think of this as looking like a criminal investigation? Again, it was probably Monday or Tuesday. I can't recall specifically what day it was. Okay, maybe this will help. You remember somebody first saying, gee, I think we've got bone fragments. That would have probably been on Tuesday, I think you said, was the 8th? Right. Then, yeah, we discovered some bone fragments on the property, and again, they had to be analyzed to determine whether they were human in nature. But you had heard back from the crime lab before somebody said, we have got bone fragments, or after? I believe it was before that we had some information back, some preliminary information back from the crime lab. So probably Monday, November 7th? Could be, correct? Okay, now, in a criminal investigation, one of the things that law enforcement people do in disseminating information publicly is attempt not to disclose information that should be only known to the culprit or the perpetrator, correct? We try to do that, yes. So that if you find someone or in talking with that person, they have that information, that they haven't gotten it by watching television. That would be correct. Or reading the paper or something. What sort of information prior to a criminal investigation do you not want disclosed in a missing persons investigation? Well, in a missing persons investigation, you want to get information out to the public as to the person who is missing, what the person might have been wearing, a general description of the person, and in particular case, her vehicle. Okay, and by elimination then, certain personal information you would not want disclosed, I assume? Personal information? About the missing person, private information? You possibly could want to withhold that, yes. And it's a decision is made. Is it pertinent? Right, to this particular missing person? If it's not particularly pertinent, then privacy concerns would prevail? Sure. All right, now, the purpose then of these collaborative or collegial meetings was to find out, gee, guys, what information do you think we should and should not disclose? Yes. Reach some agreement on that as a group? Yes. And then, as people say, make sure we're all on the same page? Correct. Then you and Mr. Kratz would be the public spokespeople? That was the decision that was made, yes. Who were the decision makers on that in the end? As far as what information is released? Right, and by whom? Again, it is a collaborative effort among everybody who's involved in the investigation. There were several incidences where the investigators said, no, we can't release this, or maybe we should release this, and a discussion was held. And maybe an agreement was reached each of those occasions, but to the extent that there was no agreement, or somebody had to make the call, make the decision, so to speak, who was doing that? Well, I guess that information, the ultimate information that was released, would have been Mr. Kratz and myself, because we were the individuals who released the information. Jointly, not one over the other? Yeah, I believe probably right. He would release information, I would release information, but we knew what information was going to be released. And you decided that jointly? Yes. The press conference on March 1 and March 2, of course, were well after Mr. Avery had been charged with murder? Yes. The March 1 press conference was before Brendan Dassey had been charged with murder and other crimes? He was in custody. Right. But he had not. Before a criminal, yes. Complaint had been filed? Yes, before he had been taken to court. The March 2 press conference was after he had been charged formally. A criminal complaint had been filed against Mr. Dassey? Yes. The criminal complaint was distributed to interested members of the media at the March 2 press conference or after? I can't recall if it was before or after, but one or the other. Yes. You made copies available? Yes. To save them trouble of going to the clerk of court? Right. So the press conference wasn't going to replace disclosure of the criminal complaint? Again, it was felt, the decision was made, that maybe we needed a press conference so that we could discuss this information with the news media and kind of inform them of what they were going to be reading and seeing in the criminal complaint. It was felt that it was important, and it was a tough decision to make, so should we just give it to them or not? We felt that it was better to be able to control and to answer questions, I guess, that the media might have. Well, what control did you have after you handed them a copy of the complaint? Well, you're still able to answer questions, and you're still able to provide them with some information that is of help, I guess, sensitivity, again, to the family in this matter. Okay, so you had no You had no serious question about the ability of the assembled reporters to read English? No, we knew that they were going to be doing that, yes. They would read the complaint for themselves? Yes. All right, so I guess necessarily the purpose of answering questions or providing further information was to tell them details or explanations beyond those contained in the words of the criminal complaint? Yes, and again, the concern was that they were going to take this and go in all directions, and we wanted to be able to control, again, the information. We have to look at it as a whole picture here, not just, not just little pieces, but a whole picture. And I guess my question was, how in the world were you going to control the media after they left that room? And we have something called the First Amendment in this country, right? Mm-hmm. Did you ask them not to print certain things, not to broadcast certain things? No, but I think by being able to answer questions and providing them with information, it's going to enhance our ability to be able to provide them and not let them run in all directions with this complaint, talking to individuals, trying to gather more information than what was in the criminal complaint. And that's always a concern that everybody has in major investigations, is that the media or anybody else is going to take information that they have obtained and go further and try to enhance what they are reading and what they are seeing and what's in the criminal complaint. Okay, now, you have used the word control here at least a half dozen times or something. I haven't counted, but by control, you certainly could control what you and Mr. Kratz were saying, correct? Yes. You could put out the information under your control that you chose to disseminate. You had control in that sense, correct? Yes. You could decline to put out information that was a way to exercise control? Yes, that's true. You could phrase information in a certain way. That was another form of control you had? Yes. The news conferences didn't just happen. Invitations were sent or notices were sent to media outlets. They were provided with the date and time so that we could have everybody together at one time, rather than having individuals from the media calling and getting information at this time and that time. Sure. So either your office or Mr. Kratz's office, somebody was either mailing or faxing, here's the date, here's the time, here's the place, kind of information to media outlets. Yes, and again, this goes back to some training that I've received as to providing one news conference where everybody gets the same information. Fair enough, and you made a facility available at which cameras could be set up? Yes. Microphones could be set up? Yes. And that was another form of control in the sense that if your words are recorded on tape or, orally, as opposed to visually. Now, somebody plays the tape. You know exactly what the viewer will see and hear? Yes. But what the media did after they left your news conference, after they shut off the lights and turned off the cameras and took the microphones, that you couldn't control? That is correct. What Steve and Avery might choose to say, you could not control? That is correct. What his family members might say, you cannot control? That is correct. Other than the week or thereabouts that you had control of the Avery property, you couldn't prevent the media from going and talking to the Avery family members? Yes, and that happened. How many times how long have you been a law enforcement officer? 33 years. Part of a long line of Pagels, I think, with the Sheriff's Department in Calumet County, right? Yes. And during your 33 years in law enforcement, on how many occasions have you held a televised news conference, as you did on November 11, to respond to something that somebody, charged with being a felon in possession of a firearm, may have said publicly? How many times have we had similar type? Yes. News conferences? I'd have to go back and check through my notes and records, but I bet you remember. There have been a couple. There have been a couple? Yes. We've had a number of major investigations that we've conducted that we have had these types of news conferences. But my question was really more narrow. I mean, how often have you had a news conference to respond to something that an arrested defendant has said publicly? Myself, probably none. This was the only time? Yes, I believe so. This case? Myself, as sheriff, investigating or being involved? Yes. Yes, I know there's been other cases, but not myself, no. Ever in your experience with him, ever hear Mr. Kratz give a news conference to respond to some claim that a defendant has made publicly? I don't know. I guess that would be something that you would have to ask Mr. Kratz if you can. But you don't remember seeing, I don't know, or hearing such a thing? I would have to look back. I don't know. I can't answer that. As you sit here today, you don't recall? I don't recall sitting here today. Okay, if I understand your testimony on direct, you were getting phone calls from Avery family members or members of the general public saying something like, "Are you framing Stephen Avery?" No, the news media was calling my cell phone and indicating that they were getting calls from Mr. Avery or from family members, and that certain information was being released to the news media via them. And they were trying to confirm whether this was factual or not. And they would be informed that any information that was going to be divulged would be divulged at the news conference or at the press conference. Referring to the November 11 news conference? This was numerous times throughout this, and in fact, even the day of March 1st, I was receiving phone calls from the news media inquiring about the fact that we understand that Brendan Dassey has been interviewed. The Averys have called us and told us this. And again, they were disseminating the information themselves, and we felt we had an opportunity, or we should be dispelling some of the information that the Averys were providing. Well, let me be clear. I mean, it was members of the news media who were telling you that the Averys had called them? Yes. You probably saw some Avery family members back before Stephen was in custody, so that is, before November 9. Probably saw some film footage, if you watched the TVs at all, of him and other family members? That is correct. But you also know that you were getting calls from media people in which they claimed that they had gotten information from the Averys that had not been made public by those media sources? Yes. And so you and Mr. Kratz made a decision to respond publicly to those phone calls on your cell phone that you were getting from the media people saying the Averys are calling us and telling us XYZ? The news media was told that any information that was going to be released would be done at the press conference and that we weren't going to be speaking to them or giving them information without having a joint conference. Okay, although you did do that, you sat down for an interview on air in your office at one point, didn't you? Yes, I've had interviews in my office. About this case? Yes. Including about claims that evidence was not handled appropriately? Yes, there was one. Yes. Prior to November 11, which I think was the news conference that responded to suggestions of mishandling of evidence or improper motives prior to that date, what investigation had you or those under your direction done to assure yourself that there had not been mishandling of evidence? Interviews were done, and the information that we were obtaining from the State Crime Lab was tending to indicate or inform us that this was possible. When you say interviews were done, who did you interview about the possible mishandling of evidence? We would be conversing with individuals out at the scene, and we knew that there was no possibility because there was always an investigator, either from the Sheriff's Department of Calumet County or from DCI, with these individuals. So we knew that wasn't a possibility. So when you say these individuals, you're referring to the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department personnel? That's who I thought you were referring to. I'm just asking who you were referring to. Yes. Okay, so the safeguard, so to speak, was, well, we'll make sure we always have a Calumet County person with the Manitowoc people. Calumet, DCI, yes. somebody from outside the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department? That was done, yes. Was that actually a policy that was put in place for this investigation? Yes. When was that policy put in place? Shortly after the investigation was turned over to Calumet County and DCI. And who put that policy in place? It was a joint decision made through our agency, the Calumet County District Attorney's Office, and the Manitowoc County DA's Office, and Corp Counsel and Sheriff's Department. Okay, so the three Manitowoc County agencies, DA, Sheriff's Department, and Corp Counsel, correct? Yes. Two Calumet County agencies, Sheriff's Department and District Attorney's Office? Yes. And I think I missed someone. DCI? DCI. DCI. So among these 6 groups, this decision was made. We will always have somebody from another department there with any Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department person involved in this investigation? Yes, because of the fact that we were the lead agency and we found out about the pending litigation against Manitowoc County by Mr. Avery. That's done on November 5, right? Yes. Why would that be done on November 5 if Stephen Avery was not a suspect or a person of interest until November 9? Again, the evidence, the vehicle was found on the Avery property. There was a lawsuit filed by Stephen, so as not to look like there was any type of tampering, we felt it was important that we do the investigation properly from the beginning. And this is the reason it was done. Again, I don't think that addresses my question. Why, if Stephen Avery was not a specific person of interest or a suspect until November 9, why the great concern to be shadowing or accompanying and watching over the shoulder of the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department? Because, Attorney Kratz, Judge, I'm going to interpose an objection if Mr. Strang is meaning to quote a previous answer or question. The question was, why was he not identified as a suspect? Mr. Strang has now said if he was not a suspect. It is a mischaracterization of the previous question that was placed. Attorney Strang, I will have the court reporter read back my original question. Question read back. Question by Attorney Strang. Maybe you could answer that question. Answer. Okay, we have a vehicle that's found on the property. We have a missing person investigation. We have Stephen Avery being one of the individuals who is living on this property, as were other members of his family. Because of the litigation, it was felt that let's ensure that there's no thing in the future that's going to be construed as being a cover-up or anything like that. Let's ensure that if we're going to do this investigation, we're going to do it properly, and let's do it from the beginning. And that's why it was done that way. All right, now, do I understand then that as to what investigation you had done into the possible mishandling of evidence as of November 11 news conference? The answer is none, but that you had put this policy in place on November 5? The policy, meaning the policy as far as if someone from another law enforcement agency is looking over the shoulder of any Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department person involved in this investigation. Again, that's the reason that Manitowoc asked us to do the investigation in the first place. I understand because of this litigation. And so, because of that litigation, we felt it was very important that if you wanted us to be the lead agency, that we do it properly from the beginning and start, and so that there can't be any inference in the future that it wasn't done properly. Understood. And the question was, as of November 11, then, putting this policy in place was the only step you had taken to assure yourself that there was not mishandling of evidence or other misconduct by law enforcement officers? Attorney Kratz, Judge, I'm also going to interpose an objection. I think we're well beyond the change of venue or pretrial publicity portion of these motions. These might be relevant to other motions, but I don't know as to pretrial publicity, the motion to dismiss, or the change of venue that's before the court. Attorney Strang, I will leave it with his answer if he's permitted to answer that question, I should say. The court. All right. Are you withdrawing your objection if this is the last question? Attorney Kratz. Yeah, if we can move on. The witness. I guess I'm still confused as to what you're asking. Attorney Strang. Do you want it read back? Last question read back. Attorney Strang. Judge, I don't think we have got that exactly right. Question by Attorney Strang. What I meant to ask was, as of November 11, other than putting in place the policy that you have described of watching over Manitowoc County people, okay, you had taken no step to assure yourself that there had not been mishandling of evidence or law enforcement misconduct? I guess that was the reason. That was the step we took that day to ensure. Right, and the question is, that could not be a question in the future, yes. Is that the only step as of November 11? I believe so, yes. Last area I have, and I'm shifting off that. You told Mr. Kratz that you had the court. Mr. Strang, before you start, about how long do you think you've got to go yet? Attorney Strang. 3 minutes. The court. 3 minutes, go ahead. Question by Attorney Strang. You told Mr. Kratz on direct examination that you have gotten many phone calls or approaches from national media as well as local regional media? Yes. You've turned down all the national media requests for comment? Yes. Have you personally been approached by anyone for a book deal or a movie deal or something of that kind? Approached? No. I don't know what you mean. No. Well, now, I don't know what you mean. I mean, by approached, I mean a letter written, a call made, an email received. Has anybody suggested to you that you ought to become involved in a book or a television movie or a commercial movie or something like that about the Avery or Halbach case? No. Attorney Kratz. Thank you. That's all I have then. The court. Counsel. If you've got some redirect, I'm going to have you do it after lunch. Correction to the last few sentences. Attorney Strang. Thank you. That's all I have then. The court. Counsel, if you have got some redirect, I'm going to have you do it after lunch. Attorney Kratz. I think I only have 2 questions, Judge. I promise it'll be very brief. The court. All right, go ahead. Attorney Kratz. If I may. Redirect examination by Attorney Kratz. Sheriff Pagel, just a couple of questions. The press conference on the 2nd of March, do you recall, before that press conference, or before I made any comments or admonition or reminder to the public that all accused individuals are presumed innocent until proven guilty? Yes, you did. And that wouldn't be something, if the complaint was just released, that would be included typically in the complaint. Is that correct? That is correct, yes. Finally, the sensitivity to the Halbach family and to crime victims, was that discussed in how details would be released? I'm specifically talking about the March 2nd complaint and the details within there. How things would be phrased, what should be left out regarding a sensitivity to the Halbachs? Oh yes, most definitely. That was done on March 2nd, and it was done throughout the investigation. Attorney Kratz. That's all the questions as to the venue and the publicity issue, Judge. The court. All right, you're excused, counsel. And then, as I understand it, we're going to have one more evidentiary witness after lunch, and then I will hear argument on the motions. Is that both parties' understanding? Attorney Strang. Not necessarily immediately after lunch. I should speak for Mr. Fallon. I shouldn't speak for Mr. Fallon. Attorney Fallon. The remaining testimony anticipated for today has nothing to do with any motion that will be decided today that's relative to a motion set for the 19th. So I think it would be better to hear the arguments or get through as many of the arguments as we can before we take the testimony of that other witness. The court. Very well. I think in most cases these motions, each of the parties have submitted written arguments already. So I will be somewhat supplemental I assume they won't be too lengthy. Attorney Fallon. Correct. The court. All right. We'll see you at 1. Noon recess taken.